I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
There's a lot of this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
Feminists claim gay rights activism as feminist territory. But is it? Or is this another example of the movement looking for a pre-existing staple of proxy victims they can whore out for political capital? Last week, we took a break from examining feminist lies to give our readers a much-needed legal update. Today, we return to our Accountability Gap series just in time for a grand cup of alphabet soup. Most folks, if asked, would tell you that alternative or queer sexualities are a progressive or feminist issue. Because religion has been commonly associated with efforts to control human sexuality, and religion has also been fundamentally connected to the political right, the far left, authoritarian as it is, was able to easily make gay rights issues theirs almost by default. In truth, however, the party responsible for sodomy law was the authoritarian state. In English common law, this really began in 1533 when homosexuality went from a morality issue between the individual and the church to a criminal offense after King Henry VIII passed the Buggery Act, making sodomy a capital crime. Yes, this is the same king whose attack on the church over his own sexual interests led to the dissolution of the monasteries, the poor becoming the state's problem instead of the church's concern, and the eventual development of a welfare system, followed by the creation of England's poor laws to keep it in check. That King Henry. King Hypocrite, Henry VIII, was not the last word on sexuality in Britain. The 1533 Buggery Act was repealed in 1553 by Queen Mary in favor of the church handling such matters, then re-established by Queen Elizabeth in 1563, then repealed again and replaced by Section 15 of the Offences Against the Person Act of 1828, and Section 63 of India's 1828 Criminal Law Act, based on both of which sodomy remained a capital offence. In 1861, a new version of the UK's Offences Against the Person Act finally repealed the death penalty, but imposed 10 years' labour. Cunnilingus was excluded from the definition of sodomy throughout these legal changes, leaving lesbians free from prosecution. U.S. sodomy laws were basically inherited from English common law. There was not a time during the nation's history when such laws were not a part of its various criminal codes, as by the time we became a nation, they were an entrenched part of the existing legal system on which ours was based. Like English common law, most U.S. sodomy laws excluded cunnilingus from their definition. In the 30s, it became more common to see it prosecuted under crime against nature, obscenity, or indecent act, but even then, the treatment differed, with lesbians considered to be misguided, while gay men were often described in inhuman terms. And throughout this history, men were the ones primarily being targeted. Yes, there was legal and social discrimination in response to homosexuality in both sexes. Historically, both sexes faced career damage, being ostracized, prosecution, legal penalties, bizarre attempts at psychiatric manipulation, including the use of rape as a form of therapy, and in the 20th century, sterilization. Gay men also faced imprisonment, forced labor, peer violence including the risk of being murdered, and, up to a point in history, execution. In some nations governed by Sharia law today, they still do. Historians with a gay and lesbian issues focus claim this difference is because early legislators couldn't imagine lesbianism existed, but in reality, it was simply largely ignored, unless blatant and open, as with Eva Kochever's early 20th century lesbian sex club, Eve Adams Tea Room, in Greenwich Village, New York, which was raided after she published her book Lesbian Love, drawing attention to herself and her establishment. The same occurred with the move to prosecute cunnilingus, which followed the somewhat mainstreaming of lesbianism in the 20s, and publicity surrounding the 1926 lesbian-themed play The Captive. Prior to the 20th century, gay rights activism had been scarce and was really not public due to the risk of being arrested and up to a point possibly executed for simply admitting one's sexuality. The first known Western gay rights organization was the Scientific Humanitarian Committee, established in 1897 by German scientist Magnus Hirschfeld, publisher Max Spohr, lawyer Edward Oberg, and writer Franz Joseph von Bülow. This organization was founded to fight for the abolition of paragraph 175 of the German Imperial Penal Code, which also criminalized sexual contact between men. Noticing a pattern yet? In conjunction with that goal, the organization engaged in extensive educational efforts and produced research and publications. The British Society for the Study of Sex Psychology was founded by Edward Carpenter and Havelock Ellis in 1914 for education and advocacy, and the Society for Human Rights was founded in Illinois in 1924 by German immigrant Henry Gerber. While these organizations existed and engaged in efforts at education and decriminalizing sodomy, their activism was not extremely public. Doing so was a dangerous prospect, as there was backlash from local police wherever gay men congregated. Lesbians were also hassled depending on their location, but their activities were still not criminalized on the level that men's were. In fact, in some areas, tolerance for lesbian activities was such that bars like Mona's 440 Club, founded in 1933 in San Francisco, attracted tourists. In the 50s, Harry Hay founded the Modeschein Society, a group to protect and improve the rights of gay men. Its name is a reference to a French medieval society of masked players, the Société Modeschein, as a statement on the public masking of homosexuality. Because the Modeschein Society brought gay rights activism more into the open in the U.S., Harry Hay is seen by many as the father of the gay rights movement. Founded in 1950 in San Francisco, by 1953, the organization was the subject of an FBI internal security investigation lasting into 1956. During that same time, the U.S.'s first lesbian rights organization, Daughters of Bilitis, was formed, initially as a more private social alternative to lesbian bars. This was partly a result of police harassment of gay and lesbian bars after World War II in the wake of anti-communist sentiment and government designation of homosexuals as subversives, and partly in response to lesbian bars' tendency to attract tourists. The organization's initial activism involved addressing the lack of available information for lesbians regarding female homosexuality. Their mission was subsequently expanded to educating the public and lobbying to destigmatize and decriminalize lesbian sex. It wasn't really until the last third of the 20th century that gay and lesbian rights activism began to make visible headway. And while in the UK this took the form of a series of small but increasing legal victories, in typical American fashion the US kicked this off with a good old-fashioned riot. On June 28, 1969, police pulled an early morning raid on a mafia-run New York City gay bar called the Stonewall Inn, declining to tip off the bar's owners ahead of time. They entered with a warrant, and in addition to making arrests, began roughing up patrons. For once, bystanders did not disperse but remained on site, becoming increasingly irate. The initial rioting began when a lesbian hit on the head by her arresting officer yelled for onlookers to do something, and lasted for 45 minutes with police barricading themselves inside the bar as the rioters attempted to set the place on fire. They had to be rescued by the riot squad and fire department. It had been primarily men whose blood, sweat, and tears had built the foundation for public advocacy. But the final spark, setting that fire under everyone's asses, was still society's protective attitude toward a woman. 5 days of protests followed, galvanizing gay, lesbian, and trans activists, leading to more open public activism and the creation of numerous gay rights organizations. This led to an explosion of public activism in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, with men as the backbone and workhorses of these organizations, the bulk of the army of hands, feet, and faces upon which the movement's humanization depended. The movement fought sodomy laws state by state, won funding for AIDS research, brought about changes in military policy, lobbied anti-discrimination law and policy into place, and led society to an understanding that has, for many, made coming out of the closet pretty much anticlimactic. There is still social prejudice to deal with, but a war has been fought and won in terms of law and policy. The gulf between the needs behind gay rights activism and lesbian activism in the West, not the least of which was that stark gap in compassion, is not inconsistent with the rest of the world, in that laws criminalizing same-sex intercourse primarily target male couples, therefore making human rights activism in this arena primarily about removing the bullseye from gay men's heads. Even today, when the vast majority of the world's nations do not criminalize non-heterosexual relationships, of those that do, some do not criminalize lesbian sex, while there are none which do criminalize lesbian sex without also criminalizing male homosexuality. In terms of human rights, gay rights activist history is primarily a history of men slowly and strategically pushing back against total dehumanization, and women quietly, then when the way has been opened, more publicly seeking validation. Every modicum of human consideration the movement won before the mid-20th century, and much of what was won since then, has been on the backs of those male activists. While the journey lesbians and bisexual women took from closet to comfortable in public wasn't a cakewalk, everyone who falls under the umbrella term queer owes male activists more than the movement today will ever admit. Now, feminists have claimed ownership of the movement, now that it's a mostly safe platform with a built-in historical victim narrative they can exploit. They're not going to acknowledge gay men's history. They're going to use gay men's activism and then turn around and claim credit for it, the same as they do with everything men have given them. The question is, are you going to let them? Hello and welcome to Badger Talk 25. Accountability is totally gay. A couple of reminders. If you want to join the chat on YouTube, please go to the Badger Livestreams channel. If YouTube is experiencing platform malfunction syndrome and won't let you listen, we're also on Twitch and Facebook. If you want to be sure you'll always be able to catch our live streams, even if YouTube decides to throw us in the gulag for wrongthink, or if you want to catch our show in its audio format, remember to go to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications. Also, we do have a fundraiser up to get our witnesses back to the courtroom for one more round against our opponent's fancy-schmancy New York lawyer. You can find it at feedthebadger.com as the featured project. Our panel tonight consists of that adorable specter of death, Prim Reaper, Woozle Slayer, Karen Strawn, and at least momentarily, Badger-in-Chief, Allison Tiemann. So, feminists have seized on sexuality issues as another area for their women-worsting pontification. Do they have a point? Allison, you've made a point about this previously to me that I wanted to have you on to talk about. Can you sort of expand on that?
Well, I've done some research into how sexuality, specifically alternative sexualities like gay and lesbian, were treated throughout history legally, and how they were punished or not punished, and what happened to people who were gay or lesbian. And what I've found consistently throughout Western history, starting at the beginning of the Christian Church, because the Romans had fairly different sexual mores, and they're not really a very good comparison to our own cultural tradition. Well, they are in some ways, but in some ways they don't have as much of a moral continuity with us in terms of sexuality. Christian groups, Christian cultures tended to punish men more severely for homosexual behavior than they did women for homosexual behavior. In fact, a lesbian could escape pretty much all forms of punishment that a gay man would be subjected to, unless, and this is the one factor that would lead to a lesbian being subject to a capital punishment, which would be hanging. The one thing that she could do would be to deceive another woman into marriage. Now, it seems pretty remarkable that in the Middle Ages, one woman could deceive another woman into marriage, but apparently there was, I guess, sexual expectations that they still maintained a certain amount of modesty. They didn't really look at each other when they were naked. So she would essentially, the lesbian trends the lesbian woman, we don't know if they were transgender, but the lesbian woman who was pretending to be a man and married to a woman would probably use some form of a dildo to ape the sexual act, as it were. And if she was caught out, it would be quite common for her to be killed for that. But only if she engaged in this kind of duplicitous behavior with a woman and basically married a woman who didn't know what she was getting into. Otherwise, lesbians didn't receive any kind of punishment, and certainly not the same level of punishment that gay men received in Christian nations. One particularly notable thing is Puritans in North America. When a man was found to have committed sodomy, they would whip. They would usually engage in whipping, possibly branding. I'm not sure. I'm doing some research. So far, I haven't seen any cases of being hung, but it was pretty severe punishments. And the one case that I've read of 2 Puritan women being found out to have engaged in lesbianism, they were charged with lascivious acts because they did it in public. And I believe one of them had to write a letter of apology. So there was sort of a significant difference in how Puritans, for example, approached punishing gay men versus gay women. And I mean, I've read some other aspects of how Puritans punished men and women. Of course, there's a lot of scholarship that really is groping for female victimhood when it comes to Puritan sexual ethics. But from what I've seen, it was generally men who were punished more severely than women in Puritan societies for sexual transgressions. In fact, in one case of adultery, the husband who was cheated on by his wife was also punished. But what's interesting is they took that case where the male adulterer was punished. He was whipped. And then the female adulterer was punished, and she was also whipped. But because she had to wear a B on her shoulder, which I believe is just like an embroidered mark on her shoulder, she was considered to be more punished than the man that she had adultery with. But they completely ignored the fact that the husband was also punished and said that that was an indication that Puritans punish women more harshly than men. And so I see this a lot. It's not just gay men and gay women, a differential in how they're punished in Christian nations. It's also a differential in how female sexual malfeasance is punished relative to male sexual malfeasance. And like I said, there's a lot of literature out there that will argue that women were more punished in Puritan societies, but they're doing things like that. They're completely omitting or ignoring, and they're not making apples to apples comparisons. So I'll hand it back to you, Hannah. I did absolutely my best effort to try to find the book that I was reading that was about lesbianism in history. Unfortunately, I'm still looking for it, but there is another book. I believe it's called Medieval Homosexualities. And just a sec, I'll get I think it's Boswell would be the author, but I can confirm that. Anyway, back to you, Hannah.
Oh, sorry. For some reason, my mute button would not unmute. So I started talking, and can you hear me now?
Yeah, like
oh, good.
Before, now, actually.
Well, okay, yeah, you guys could hear me because I was muted in OBS. Apparently, there's a slight delay when I unmute in OBS now. There wasn't the last time. But anyway, going back. I wanted to bring this up because this is something that we hear from feminists like all the time. They're constantly expressing this idea that women have it worse in terms of sexual norms. Women have it worse in terms of penalization and being judged for violating those sexual norms. And and yes, Guy Moore, my mute button will not unmute is my catchphrase. Everything seems to want to happen with a delay on this computer. But in any case, this has been an ongoing mantra with them, and it has been what they've used actually pretty effectively. I can't really say tried, because throughout the 90s and the start of the 21st century now, they pretty much have taken ownership of alternative sexualities activism, for better or worse. And I think it's for worse, because they've pretty much ignored the individuals who are the ones that did the most work, the individuals who are the ones that have had the most suffering, and made it all about women. They've even tried to make homophobia against gay men and hatred for trans women about women. And both of those things are actually exercises in misandry and gynocentrism. The biggest reason why gay men are judged is because they don't dedicate their lives to women. And the biggest reason why trans women are judged is because they are considered to be usurpers of female privilege, even by people who don't acknowledge that it's privilege.
I don't know that it's that they're usurpers of female privilege, but when you look at the standard scenario that gets discussed in sort of activist circles, where you have a trans woman and she's dating a man, and then they sort of have their crying game moment, and then the guy flips out and maybe lashes out violently, because he was unaware that this is a woman with a penis. And these activists will call that trans misogyny, but it's not trans misogyny, because if that trans woman was a natural woman, like was a woman-born woman, as they call them, right, was a chromosomally female woman, he would not have done that. The whole reason he is acting out violently in that way is because the individual in front of him in the bedroom at the moment of we're about to do it, right, is in his mind not a woman, it's a man.
Yeah.
And so it's that trans misandry.
That is still a female privilege. And in its own right, being seen as a potential sex partner by a straight man in this particular arena is a female privilege, a biological female privilege. I will say this simply because it is hatred of trans women because they are seen as men, and the reason that they are not attractive to a completely straight guy is because they are seen as men. And actually that's not really the type of hatred that I'm talking about. That's an in the moment reaction. Yeah. And actually, when I talk about hatred of trans women, I'm talking about people who see them in public and act like their being there is an assault on society. People who resent the fact that they wear women's clothes at all. People who treat them like they don't have the same right to go to the bathroom as everybody else in a normal situation. And in those situations, it is they are hated not for being like women, but for being seen as men trying to act like women, for being seen as men trying to take women's place. And TERFs actually, their whole thing is, you're invading women's spaces, you're invading women's rights, you're taking women's resources. It's all about. So it really is. They have misandrous.
They have this weird. The TERFs have this weird thing that trans women are attempting to infiltrate in order to rape.
Yeah.
Right. And trans men are essentially doing the full bore sleeping with the enemy thing. That they're like complete turncoats, and they're essentially. So literally trans women are trying to appropriate the oppression of women, the oppressive, the oppressive conditions of women, right, in order to gain access to women's spaces so that they can rape them, right? And trans men are essentially saying, fuck you, women, I can pass as a man, and I'm going to go enjoy all of this dick privilege over here.
Yeah, now we've got people in the chat asking what TERFs are. So that's trans-exclusionary radical feminists. Trans-exclusionary meaning that they consider only biological women to be women, and they really tie themselves in mental knots to do this, because there are genetic conditions that don't fit their definition of biological women, that the individual is a woman and has female parts at birth. They may not always be entirely working female parts, but they are there, and that sort of excludes them logically from TERF's definition of women, but they will include them, and they'll come up with circular logic or other types of irrational reckoning to like magical thinking. Well, these women are magically women, but aside from all of these medical exceptions, if you don't have 2 X chromosomes, you're not a woman. So they.
But also, gender is a social construct.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, gender is a social construct, but biology and biology should never be an argument for anything except when we want to kick everybody out of our club that we don't like. And so they're horrible.
Well, I mean, if you want an example of a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, I would suggest you go look at some blog posts and videos by Man Cheese, otherwise known as Sale Polani, otherwise known as Diana Boston,
the rat lady.
Yeah, she's not a rat lady.
The mouse lady. Sorry,
the mouse lady. Yeah,
the mouse lady. She doesn't like rats. She lets wild mice. No, it's not Diana Davidson.
Not Diana Davidson.
No, very
Diana
much
Boston.
Not Diana Davidson. She probably would be too scared to come anywhere near Diana Davidson.
Well, anybody would. Diana Davidson's terrifying.
No.
No, she is. She's terrifying. She's terrifying because she's like so fucking meticulous.
Yeah. But I've never been in an argument with her, so I'm not afraid of her.
No, I mean, like, I've been in an argument with her and we sorted out our differences. But like when I look at how she can actually like comb through evidence and find inconsistencies and deal with like all of the minutiae and like read through court transcripts and like just put her brain to the parsing of like just these excruciatingly boring details, right? I'm a big picture thinker. She's the person who's going to actually, so I'm the person who's going to be able to say, yeah, the court's going to be unfair to you, and she's the person who's going to say, here's how we're going to take your case and move it forward, right? Because she's just, like, we have different strengths, and her strength terrifies me.
To me, that's not scary. That's sexy. But
yes, it is. It is absolutely sexy.
Totally a different reaction there. But yeah, no. In any case, and Guy Moore says have her on the show. We used to. She used to be part of the show, and we went our separate ways, and we're not going to talk about that. But because it's water under the bridge, honestly. And,
well, it is, and
we really can't extol the virtues of Diana Davidson enough. That's not what the show's about today.
Including her essentially reaching out and saying, this is all water under the bridge. Yeah. We have a mission, right? And let's work together because we have a mission.
Yep,
So,
exactly. And
to kind of bring it back to
yes,
just the
do
topic,
that.
just from the initial intro video, one thing that I was thinking about the whole time is just, they would probably say that men were treated more harshly because nobody took lesbian relationships as seriously, because somehow they can always twist it to be, oh, well, it's just because women are oppressed, that's why this happened.
Oh, they did say that. They claimed that legislators weren't aware, but then I found historical evidence that they were, and they didn't care.
Oh my God. I was seriously just kidding, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, no, this is something that that's another thing that I can't count the things that I hate about feminism, because every time I reach the last thing, the number, I was like, oh, okay, I'm done counting. That's the highest number. Something else comes along. And this women worsting thing is one of them. That's one of the biggest ones, and the fact that they will go through and insist that something any bad thing that happens to women is apparently worse than all bad things that happen to men. Okay, so lesbians weren't taken seriously as a serious threat. Let's say that was true. Let's say the legislators just didn't, it never occurred to them that women could sexually stimulate each other. They didn't think about that. Like that hasn't been a sexy thing for men forever, the same way it's our hearts melt when we see two guys together. No, they never thought of that before. It didn't happen until porn, right? And there was nothing to inspire that porn to come along. It just it's
just the male oppressors that wanted that porn. They willed it into existence.
Yes. Yeah. But just imagine, okay, so the worst thing that happened before they started including female sexual stimulation of each other in obscenity laws and stuff like that. Is that actually a big deal in comparison to being hanged or castrated? Or,
yes,
having your genitals removed.
Yes, yes, Hannah.
I mean, seriously,
yes. Because I, as a woman who muff dives, am not taken as seriously as a man who gobbles cock. Okay, and so because of that, yes, he's hanged, and I'm just allowed to be everybody's eccentric aunt. Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's okay. Yeah, no, but that's not the point, Hannah. The point is, the law didn't take me and my muff diving as seriously as it took that dude over there and his cock sucking.
Yep, there you go. It's obviously women are just less important. Yeah.
And the funny thing is that they keep trying to take the cause of gay men under their wing and, all queer people, and yet there was recently that article, why white cis gay men should check their privilege, and how gay men are too privileged now, so we shouldn't pay attention to them anymore. But yet when it's convenient, no, it's totally a feminist issue. It's
you know what's fucking hilarious?
What?
You know what's fucking hilarious? There was a thing during the second wave called the Red Stocking Manifesto. And it essentially portrayed gay men as misogynist. Literally, it was presenting this idea that the only reason men would ever have sex with other men is because they hate women, right? They hate women so much they will fuck each other rather than go near a woman. Okay, and this was born out of the feminist political movement that was responsible for lesbian separatism, for political lesbianism, for female segregation. So literally you had this situation where you had feminists like Kate Millett and others saying the only answer, right? Men and women are two nations at war. right? They are two nations at war with women always losing, always on the losing end. We are the victims. They are the oppressors at every single turn, in every single circumstance, no matter what, right? Okay, we can figure out a way to parse it as the woman is the victim and the man is the perpetrator, right? Okay, so the only solution, the only fucking solution for women is to completely separate from men, right? There is no such thing as women's liberation in a society where men and women exist, where they coexist, right? So we must have a separatist, a female separatist movement, okay? And women must live on their own in communes, and they must engage, right, in something called political lesbianism, which is, okay, we understand that you don't really like MUF and that you don't really want to dive into MUF, but, okay, if you fuck that guy over there, who you're actually attracted to, you're sleeping with the enemy, so what you really need to do is convince yourself to eat pussy because lesbianism is the answer, right? And like this is the hilarious thing is that Andrea Dworkin took heat. Andrea Dworkin took heat from her contemporaries because she actually gave a speech. She said, every time I get up on a stage and there's a question and answer period, I get bombarded with angry lesbians demanding to know why I still fuck men.
Oh God!
Right? Okay, and
I'm sorry, but
I'm
no, but okay,
didn't realize there were men that would actually fuck Andrea Dworkin.
Yeah, but
or women who would be mad that she's fucking men. Like,
but this is the part of the movement that wrote the Red Stocking Manifesto, which was essentially casting gay men as lesbian separatists, right? That these gay men hate women so much they see no other recourse than to fuck each other because women are just like disgusting, right? But that's not what gay men are about. It's not what gay men have ever been about, right? That's what lesbian separatists, political lesbians were about. So it was like a whole huge fucking project in projecting, right? It was a whole exercise in projecting their own fucked up psychology onto gay men. And we somehow wonder, why is there this bizarre unhealthy relationship between feminism and gay men? I don't understand where it might be coming from.
I was gonna say that political lesbianism seems like the least sexy thing that I can imagine, but then you talked about women being angry at Andrea Dworkin for still fucking men, and then I was proven that there is something more disgusting.
Well, okay, here's the thing, John the Other, right? I'm sure that everybody who's listening, who's, been in this for any length of time would know who he is, right? He was actually discussing with me before he met Diana, notably, that, he was thinking about coming out of the closet as politically gay. Not because he likes men, not because he wants to fuck men, and not because he would ever fuck a man, but he was thinking, like, sauce for the gander? Is there such a thing as politically gay? Right? And so he was considering it as like sort of a strategic move. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking, like, there literally are women, and there have been women who have been in domestic violence shelters, who, like, straight women who have gone to domestic violence shelters in the 80s and 90s and have been coerced into sexual acts with the female staff there.
It's
because
kind of, I don't even know what to say to that. That's
not-
no, it's because feminism is about a rejection of it's not about a rejection of the masculine. It's about a rejection of any kind of cooperation or cooperative contract with the male.
That what you just talked about, that's something that actually should be investigated. And it's probably not going to be because those shelters are so protected. But I wish I could say it was a surprise, but it's not a surprise at all. From my experience at sort of at both ends of those shelters, I've never had to be in one of those shelters. I never was in a long-term abusive relationship. But I have had friends who have stayed in those shelters, and I have been on, to court with falsely accused men whose accusers came from those shelters and had services from those shelters. And there are people that clearly go into that work because they want to help victims. They want to prevent future abuse and so on. There are people that go into that work because they hate men. And there are people that go into that work because they themselves are predators. And the best way for a predator to find more victims is to be where they go to escape their predators. And so you end up with people who they know where they can find people they can dominate, and they have their excuses for why they think they should be allowed to dominate people. And in this particular case, it's politics. It's this belief of, I'm doing this because I'm right. It's the church of feminism now, the church of become a feminist and you'll never have to, and become a political lesbian, and you'll never have to depend on a man again. And it's quite similar to that section of the vagina monologues that got removed. The one about initially I think they changed the age and then they removed it altogether because people knew it was about molestation. And it was a sketch about an older homeless woman molesting a younger homeless girl, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was an adult woman who seduced a 13-year-old girl, and it was told from the 13-year-old girl's perspective. And the last line in the scene was I raped? Well, if it was rape, then it was a good rape.
Jeez.
Yeah, and it was this attitude of, I'll never have to depend on a man again. That the very last thing that was said in that was that I'll never have to depend on a man again. And meaning I'll never have to depend on a man again for enjoyment. And honestly, when I first read that made me sick. This is something, and yeah, they talk about it like it is one woman helping another woman. It's not one woman helping another woman. It's one woman taking advantage of another woman's vulnerability.
Yeah.
But because they frame it as assistance, they convince themselves and everyone around them that what they are doing is not wrong. And they will circle the wagons, and they will protect each other. And so and as much as I say this is something that desperately needs to be investigated, because this is not normal, natural sexuality. This is predatory behavior against people who are not exploring their normal, natural sexuality. They're there to get help.
Yeah.
Or they're there to use the system against their husbands in a divorce case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but one of the things that actually
they're still vulnerable.
That actually did surprise me about that was, because Aaron Pitsey has always contended that, boys over 12 get routinely turned away from domestic violence shelters. And I thought, well, that's she's talking about the UK. That would never happen in Canada. And then I was on a panel discussion a few months ago in Edmonton here with a radio psychologist. A psychologist has a radio show named Gans Franz. He was moderating, and I was sitting there with Tom Mattey's daughter. Tom Mattey, he had a situation where he was his wife attacked him with a knife, and then she went and sought. She took the kids, their 3 kids, and went to a domestic violence shelter and claimed that he was the abuser. And then when it looked like that wasn't going to work for her, she went and took them back to Thailand. And he spent 2 years essentially getting the 2 older kids, getting custody of them through the courts in Thailand, which is even more difficult than getting custody through the courts here in Canada, because Thailand is very, very sort of tender years doctrine kind of thing, right? But so his daughter, who was 16 at the time, was sitting next to me, and she was talking about her experience of the shelter. And she said that she was talking with one of the staff members, and they were telling her, you know, your brother's 10. He's not going to be able to stay here much longer. He's going to have to go soon, because, and I was just like, seriously, a 10-year-old boy, they're already thinking we're going to have to kick him out because he's a danger to the women here.
You know, they do portray it that way too. They'll call him a danger to the women. But the reality is, as Aaron Pizzi pointed out, a lot of the women in those shelters are violent, and a lot of the women in those shelters are sort of, I wouldn't say necessarily sexually predatory, but they're definitely out of the ordinary in terms of their understanding of other people's boundaries. And they don't, you know, they do engage in inappropriate behavior, and they don't necessarily all have an understanding, a recognition of the appropriateness of age of consent, you know. And so as soon as you have an adolescent boy in there, the real danger is that the women who are at the more violent and dysfunctional end of the spectrum are a danger to him, not the other way around.
Oh, absolutely. But you know, and I'm looking at this.
That's not a good reason to kick them out.
I'm looking at this kid. He's like, at this point, he's 14, and he's like the scrawniest little thing that you've ever seen. He's like this tiny little half white, half Thai kid who's like maybe like 90 pounds, if that, and you know, still has some of his baby teeth, I think. And like this is years after they were talking about, well, he's going to have to be kicked out of the shelter soon. So I'm thinking to myself, how small was he when they were talking like that? It was just, it's absolutely, it's bizarre.
It's completely ridiculous. Like I've got this one paper that talks about sexual victimization in juvenile facilities reported by youth from 2008 to 2009. And one of the posts in here is approximately 95% of all youth reporting staff sexual misconduct said that they had been victimized by female staff. And to put that in context, in 2008, 42% of staff in state juvenile facilities were female. So these people act like, oh, it's the men that we have to worry about, even though...
I know. You know, and one of the most horrific things is Janice Fiamengo did a speech, and I wish I had the link. I wish I knew exactly which speech it was that she gave, where this woman, Adele Mercier, she's a professor of philosophy at the University of Ottawa or some nearby university. And she essentially argued against that point by saying, well, that's just because most people are heterosexual and most young boys want to have sex.
Yeah, I'm surprised that feminists didn't jump on her from the most people are heterosexual standpoint. Now, we did actually have a whole exchange with her. She, in fact, threatened to sue A Voice for Men and Allison over that, and I'll try to find that information and put it in the low bar.
But she literally
said, have a whole set of videos.
She literally said it's just a reflection of heteronormativity.
She actually. She got worse than that. She actually got worse than that. She accused the boys of seducing the staff.
Yes.
So it goes right back to that problem of society treating sexual dysfunction and sexual misconduct worse when men do it, to the point of where women are doing it, they will blame the victim for the misconduct, and they will accuse the victim of seduction, when in fact the woman has all of the power in that situation. I mean, here you're talking about a captive situation. But I want to go on from that to there was an article written by we used to have several articles by Thomas Elland, and I don't think he's actually written for us in a while because we've been out of contact with him. But this one, yeah, I got it here. Faggots are officially out of the progressive stack on the Honey Badger Brigade blog, and we had mentioned before about the fact that sort of gay men's issues are being trampled in this women worsting effort by feminists having taken over the sexuality issues discussion. And right in the middle of it, because he talks a little bit about his history and a little bit about the way he sees being gay. He's gay, and a little bit about the way he sees being gay and his experience of it. And then he goes on to the two paragraphs that I wanted to point out, or the couple of paragraphs that I wanted to point out. He says, the event that led to this discussion was the massacre of 49 people at the gay club Pulse in Orlando. After thousands of pages of legislation to discourage hate crimes, I and other cynical assholes were quieted. There is an enemy that hates homosexuals more than anything, radical Muslims, also known as more than half the worldwide Muslim population. So I kept my fucking mouth shut. I cried for the victims and their families, and I waited for the response. After all, this was the tipping point. It had to be. A Muslim radical had killed 49 people for being in a gay bar, the largest hate crime against gay perceived, and in parentheses he says, I'll explain why I use that term in a minute, people, and the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history at that time, obviously. All those laws, all that liberal outrage was nowhere to be found. First, Obama talked about the shooting without whispering the words Islam, Muslim, or even homophobic. Then Hillary stated just how peaceful the ideology that led to the death of all those people was. Then the media swallowed and regurgitated the most fucked up batshit crazy reasons why this Islamic terrorist attack wasn't Islamic. Amanda Marcotte blamed toxic masculinity, despite the fact that most of the victims were men. Others blamed Islamophobia, ignoring the imam who 3 weeks prior to the massacre had called for the death of gays in Orlando. The guilt trip took a turn and went to good old-fashioned Christian bashing, because when a Muslim kills 49 people in the name of Allah, that's totes on the Christians. But the worst one, to me at least, was the attempt of making the shooter gay. Many major media sites cited how he had visited the club before and used Grindr and other gay apps. Apparently the entire media doesn't understand the concept of scouting. Or they do, but they wanted to make him gay. They wanted him to be a closeted faggot with a conservative Taliban whore father whose internal struggle led him to commit this attack. Let me correct something here. I've been closeted. Nearly all gay people have. Why didn't I or any of the millions of closeted gays commit a mass murder? Oh, also the FBI released a statement declaring there's no evidence whatsoever that Mateen was gay. So if we take apart the media narrative, all of the factors they covered can be traced back to huge groups of people and made into a moot argument Except, of course, Mateen's religion, a religion that commands for homosexuals to be killed, something that's openly practiced in criminal law in 10 Muslim countries. And this is, he's talked about that in the article, and then he also talked about the fact that only the female victims were talked about. It was constantly touted, all these women that died in this club, all these, all these straight people that died in this club. Oh, it wasn't about, homosexuality. It wasn't homophobia.
Are you fucking kidding me?
They were killed because they were in a gay club.
So I'm a fucking KKK member. I'd go into a black church, right? I mow everybody down. The janitor was white and he took a fucking bullet. That means
it's not a racial shooting.
Yeah, it wasn't a racially motivated shooting. Like, give me a fucking break. Like, this really infuriates me, right? Because, there are things, like, Allison has said it. She coined the term Islamopolophobe, right? Yep. Okay, there are things about Islam that how it's portrayed in our culture that I take issue with, right? Particularly the, women worsting that Western media does with Islam, right? The women always have it worse. The women have it so much worse. The women are so oppressed. Their men are so horrible to them, right? And the men all just fucking sit around with their feet up like kings, like fucking like New York lawyers, and the women are all fucking scrabbling in the mud. That's how Islam works, right? Okay, yeah. No, it's not, right? But there are some fucked up things about Islam, some serious fucked up things, and some of them actually pertain to women, right? Islam's kind of, you have carte blanche to treat non-Islamic women however you want. That I don't like that, right? I think that's kind of fucked up, and I don't want it anywhere near me or my daughter, right? But the entire idea that, like, what Muslims do, right? When they strap a fucking bomb to their chest and go and run into a crowd and yell Allahu Akbar, they are telling us what they're doing and why.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. When they go into a fucking, when they phone 911 and say, I pledge my allegiance to ISIS, who throw gays off of rooftops, right? And then you go shoot up a fucking gay club, right? You are literally telling people what you are doing and why. And it's like the left is like, he just must not have been hugged enough as a child,
toxic masculinity.
Yeah. It's like, I have to figure out something, he literally told me what he was doing and why, but I think that if we really look at it, we can figure out some way to blame it on white Western culture.
Oh, right? I know. It's because he had access to, which gun is the one that they keep saying?
AR-15.
Yeah, the AR-15. All I could think of was the older machine guns. But it's because he had access to an AR-15, but he didn't use an AR-15.
Mental health.
Well, it doesn't matter. He still had access to one. That's what caused it.
Well, mental health, sure, right? Mental health, I'm happy. I'm happy with people who are anybody who fucking opens fire on a crowd of people for any reason whatsoever. There's gonna be a mental health issue going on there, right?
Yeah,
and it might not be
exactly a revelation.
Right. It might not be a chemical mental health issue. It might not be like I have an imbalance in my serotonin and norepinephrine and my
dopamine.
Dopamine, that's it. You know, I might not have some kind of weird chemical imbalance. I might not have paranoid schizophrenia.
Or you might have a chemical imbalance with external causes, like bath salts.
But I might actually have a mental health issue in terms of the fact that I've been radicalized, right? And radicalization is not something that's just about Islam. It's, you know, like it happens on the far right, it happens on the far left, it happens, you know, like it's something that happens. It's a form of, I guess, brainwashing, ideological a possession is how Jordan Peterson calls it. Ideological possession, right? Where you go all in, right? And so whether you're like a Raelian or whether you're like freaking drinking Kool-Aid and killing yourself because you expect that fucking spaceships are going to come and pick you up and take you to heaven, whatever, right? There's something there that just ain't right, because you've been able to be indoctrinated into a way of thinking that isn't good. That doesn't have that isn't positive for you or for others. And so essentially, like, it is a mental health issue. I do think it is, but at the same time, you can't just say, oh, well, you know, it's because of white male privilege that, you know, brown Muslim men are fucking lighting up gay bars. Like, what?
Yeah, no, you really, really cannot. And I think what Thomas really brought home was the fact that to the progressive left, to feminists, to identity politics ideologues in general, gay men are nothing but a trump card that they can throw down. Look, gays, homophobia, you know, violence against gay men, hate crimes, and it stops the conversation, or it forces the conversation in a particular direction. And the way that he described it, another paragraph here, says, you don't hold loyalties to a slave, and a slave shouldn't expect any. The liberal establishment managed to pull a trick on us, making us think that we would be able to remain as decisively distinct community while becoming part of the mainstream, too. You can't eat your cake and have it, no matter how many poor Christian bakers you sue. Obama, Clinton, they didn't see that people that horrible night. They realized they were either going to lose a knight or a queen, and they, of course, chose to lose the knight. And that's the situation. When they talked publicly about that incident, they sacrificed the gay rights issue of somebody walked into a gay club and murdered people for being in a gay club in order to cover up the issue of that person was a radicalized Islamic extremist, because that was a more important card for them. And so they decided, and that's why he titled it "Gay Men Are Officially Out," or "Faggots Are Officially Out" of the progressive stack. This is basically it.
And then
gay men will be touted as a progressive left issue, as an identity politics issue, as long as they are useful to identity politics ideologues. And when they're done, when you're not useful anymore, you become trash and they throw you away.
Wasn't it like a month later when Rose McGowan essentially said, like, you know, gay men have male privilege and therefore, you know, they're out of the progressive stack?
Essentially, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they still have, you know, they still have all of the conditions that straight men have, except they're gay. Well, you know what?
Yeah,
they fought hard to be seen as having the same conditions that straight men have. They fought tooth and nail to be treated like human beings for hundreds of years after the state took over the church's opposition to their sexuality, and died for it. And there were gay leaders who were killed for being who they were.
Well, just have to wonder, like, why, when you actually look at the, you know, they were the workhorses of the LGBT movement. They absolutely were. But one of the things too is that, you know, like it really is like when I was on the agenda with Steve Bacon, on a it was a discussion of white privilege, which is not my area of expertise, but I did my best as the only person remoting in and who couldn't see anybody else and fucking had no clue what was going on. But I did tell the Black columnist, Desmond Cole, there's no such thing as driving while Black. It's driving while Black and male. And he said, you know, you're right. You're right. My mother and my sister would never be pulled over for driving around in a nice car or in the wrong neighborhood. Right? But I still think they have it worse as women.
Yeah.
And
of course.
But you know, when gay men decided that they wanted to take on all of the norms of masculinity within the culture, I don't know whether they realized what they were taking on, because what they were taking on was, you know, lesbian sexuality is viewed the same way as any other woman's sexuality. It's benign, it's harmless, it might be distasteful. You might want to do something about that, discourage it, but certainly nobody needs to die, right? You might, you know, generate some cultural stereotypes about temptresses and Jezebels and things like that, right? But certainly nobody needs to die. But when gay men took on the public identity of being men, right? What were they taking on? They were taking on that identity maybe like 15, 20 years after the last man in the United States was hanged for raping a woman. Like, we literally used to hang men for raping women.
Yep.
You know, like decades, centuries before the feminists of the second wave came along in the 60s and 70s to tell us that raping women is bad.
Well, good thing they did. Otherwise, we might have never figured it out.
Oh, and now they'll
know.
tell you that it used to be legal, and they'll tell you that beating your wife used to be legal, even though there are, you know, historical news articles, which you can find on the Unknown History of Misandry, which is a blogger blog. Articles of about judges and legislators wanting to bring back the whipping post for wife beaters, which means
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah,
Teddy Roosevelt, one of the most popular presidents in American history, arguably the most, wanted to bring back the whipping post.
Yeah, and when they say they want to bring something back, that means that it was a previous thing. So this idea,
it was already in use.
It was already in use. Which means that not only had it been done
prior to 1904, it was
right. But at some point,
the preferred thing.
Yeah, at some point, somebody had to argue against this cruel and unusual punishment.
It was actually women,
and then at a later date, men once again started wanting to bring back the punishment, because they saw other men's behavior as being so horribly inappropriate.
It was hilarious. I was reading an article from I think it was the late 1800s, but I might be wrong. Might be early 1900s. On that blog that he had dug up, that Robert Saint Estèphe, where the judge had offered the battered woman. He said, I'm going to give you the choice, right? The sheriff can deliver the lashes, or You can deliver the lashes. And here is why I'm suggesting this. Certainly the sheriff's arm is stronger than your arm and could inflict more pain. But the satisfaction you might derive and the humiliation he would experience by being lashed by his own wife might be worth the difference.
Yep. And this is this idea that, these things were not treated with seriousness in the past. The idea that women were just chattel and nobody cared about them, and men were allowed to beat them, and nobody paid any attention to lesbians. Lesbians didn't exist, and all of these lies that feminists tell. There's plenty of information on the internet. There's plenty of information out there in old news articles and so on. You can very well tell that they are, in fact, lying through their teeth about these things.
Oh, lying. Absolutely lying. And it's like, like back in the day, back in like 1982, right, when you had to go to the library and get out the microfilm and like comb through articles in newspapers that were essentially unsearchable. Like there's no such thing as a keyword search back then, right? But now there's no excuse. There's no excuse for anybody to actually be uninformed about this stuff. You can find this stuff for yourself. And this is one of the things that, like, when I have people write me sometimes and they're like, oh, can you send me to the sources of the, the information that you use and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't have some golden ticket to some secret vault.
Yeah, no,
right?
Just use this set of keywords.
Yeah, I just found it. Like, I found it. I went on the men's rights subreddit. I, clicked on things that looked interesting. Other people find it, they post it. It's like it's floating around out there. It's all out there. Go look for it.
Now, the one correction I will make is there was a way to do a more keyword-like search on microfiche, and through books and everything. There were, God, I can't think of that. The Dewey Decimal System was linked with a set of cards. There would be a big, it was like a giant dresser with tiny little drawers in it, and each drawer had a letter of the alphabet on it.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, card catalog.
The card catalog would give you at least basic references for names of books and subject matter. You could look things up by book title. You could look things up by the subject. You could look things up by the author name. And when it came to microfilm and microfiche, you could actually find out, what kinds of stories were in various issues of periodicals that were saved on microfilm and microfiche.
But you couldn't do it from your sofa. You couldn't find.
And the other thing is, it wasn't like a Google search where if the word, like, say you wanted to look up lesbian rape and news history, whether or not there'd ever been an article on that being prosecuted, you wouldn't necessarily look up lesbian rape in the card catalog and it would find every article that had the words lesbian rape anywhere in the text. Like Google searches are
it would probably point you. It would probably point you to a situation where a lesbian was raped by a fundamentalist Christian who wanted to punish her for her bad sexuality.
If it was the topic of any of the literature in the library, which it probably wouldn't have been back then, but if it was the topic of any of the literature in the library, that literature might be listed. If there was an author with that name, obviously there wouldn't be, but if there was, that author would be listed. If there was a book title, that would be listed on the card, but you wouldn't necessarily see if there was a news article that talked about various types of sexual misconduct, and one of them was lesbian rape, and it was only mentioned once in the article. It wouldn't be on the card, most likely, unless somebody had gone through and read the article and then said, that needs to be on this card, and then added it. So it was, in comparison to Google, Like, it would be very frustrating to today's internet user to go back and use those cards having never done it before. But it was what we had, and it was very effective for the time.
Yeah, well, and
but
it's
that's
still,
a complete and utter digression, and I'm gonna go.
I'm still frustrated by it because Google does weight the results based on what people are actually looking for, and so if you Google domestic violence against men, what you're gonna get is a whole bunch of articles about domestic violence against women.
Yeah, Google
men.
doesn't.
Right.
Google weights their stuff based on what they want people to read, based on
what people are looking for.
Well, no, it's come out that they weight they actually hide. In fact, they do hide the Honey Badger Brigade blog. If you do a Google search for any of our articles by title, and you haven't looked it up before, you probably won't see it on the page. You can like put it in quotes and everything, and it will still not come up first. And I've actually had it say that it doesn't exist. It didn't have any results at all for articles that I've tried to find on our blog. So yeah, they hide us. They don't like us. But that's all. Like I said, off-topic stuff. I'm going to go ahead, since we are getting off topic more and more, I'm going to go ahead and just start reading the super chats. And they go all the way back to the beginning of the show. At the beginning of the show, Xeranx gave us $5 and said, the woman who deceived a woman to have sex with her with a blindfold, what happened to her? Now, I'm not sure what story he's talking about.
Oh, that was in the UK.
Is that the woman that had posed as a man
on
social
online
media?
dating? Yeah.
Okay.
And but they were actually, and here's the funny thing about the case, is that they were actually friends in real life, these two women, and then the one woman decided to pose as a man on social media and on dating sites to get this woman, and she'd said, "Oh, I'm disfigured," or something like that, and so I want you to wear a blindfold and blah blah blah. And I think she was actually convicted. If I recall, she actually did get a conviction and a significant sentence, at least comparatively significant. Like something that. Not necessarily as harsh a sentence that she would have gotten if she was a man, but certainly more than 30 hours of community service and a suspended sentence. So yeah.
So she was actually acknowledged as a sexual predator.
Yeah, probably because she took on a masculine persona, and so people could see her as a man.
Yeah. Well, actually, that ties right in with what Allison said at the beginning of the show, doesn't it? That's exactly the thing, and that's actually what was under discussion when Xeranx sent that super chat. Joey Jojo gave us $2 US and said women's sexual liberation was a mistake. I'm going to expand on that one. Actually, the so-called sexual revolution was a mistake. The sexual revolution, as the counterculture in the 60s and 70s brought it about, the free love aspect of it was based on this idea of separating physical sex and loving each other as human beings from falling in love and developing an emotional and psychological bond with another person, as if you can just, fuck people and then move on and not have any potential repercussions. And the idea of that, it sounds very attractive if you don't think about it too much, and you don't think about the fact that actual human beings are involved, and actual human beings get attached, and actual human beings have baggage that they bring with them into the relationship, and actual human beings change their mind about what's right or wrong in terms of sexual liberation, or in terms of sexual connections and sexual conduct, and then later regret their actions. And actual human beings try to reframe those historical actions of theirs in terms that they won't feel so embarrassed about. And then they lie. And because women are allowed to get, to lie, and when they do, men are held accountable for whatever it is they've lied about, that puts men in a significant amount of danger. So it was a bigger mistake for men than it was for women in terms of legal dangers. And the other end of it is, we now have this epidemic of single mother households that are stuck in poverty, that the kids are trapped in poverty, that it becomes a generational cycle, and there's where it was a huge mistake for women. And of course it's a huge mistake for children. Chromosome Wizard brings up polyamory. My experience with polyamory, and this is first-hand experience, is, once again, you're dealing with actual human beings who change their mind, and actual human beings who get very attached. And when you have one actual human being who gets very attached and another who changes her mind, you end up in a situation where your heartbreak is permanent. And
I will say...
No, don't interrupt this. Don't interrupt this.
Okay.
I would not advise anybody to step lightly into polyamory. It is the quickest way to get you and your existing partner's hearts wrecked. You want to make absolutely sure you know what you're getting into before you do this. And
what? That's
I'm not done. That's not saying that polyamory is wrong. It's not saying that nobody can do it. It's saying that you cannot step lightly into something that with two people is already complex. When you have more than two people involved, you exponentially increase the complexities. You exponentially increase the complexities within the relationship, and you exponentially increase the complexities outside the relationship. So you exponentially increase the pressures on the relationship. So, once again, this is not condemnation, and it is not a matter of don't ever do this. It is a matter of don't think that this is for everybody. Don't think that this is a solution to the free love idea. Don't think that it's something that you can just play around with. And for God's sake, don't think that it's going to be a fairy tale. Because it's not. It can be, in the case of people who don't get jealous, it can be a wonderful experience. And it can be, in cases with people who are very careful and very dedicated and very good at communicating with each other, a wonderful lifelong experience. But if you think that it's going to be just like ordinary dating, it's not.
I do want to say you have to look at when you look at how men and women feel when they've been betrayed by a partner, right? So if you essentially ask a man or a woman, what are you most upset by? Is it physical cheating? Is it just your partner had sex with somebody and it meant nothing? Right? Or was it emotional cheating where they never even touched each other, but they've fallen in love? Okay? And you look at the gender differences in which scenario men and women find more of a betrayal. The men will find the physical cheating to be more of a betrayal on average, and the women will find the emotional cheating to be more of a betrayal on average. Now, when you translate that into why somebody would be interested in a polyamorous relationship. For men, it's probably going to be because they want sexual variety. They want the physical aspects of things. That's on average why a man would be interested in that. And a woman, she would be more likely to engage in polyamory because she is interested in emotional connections with other people. And she's going to, I have told people who have said, my wife has suggested, or my girlfriend has suggested polyamory, and I'm like, just keep in mind that she could just be shopping for better offers, because she's looking for that emotional attachment, that the emotional intimacy. And if she finds it and it's better than what she found with you, and I have seen this over and over and over and over and over again, a man can stray 1,000 different ways and still come home to the woman he loves. But a woman, the moment she finds that better offer, she's gone.
Yeah. The one couple that I knew personally that went through that, yeah, she found somebody else, and then he also found somebody else, and they wound up in single relationships with two separate people. So
yeah, none of that is my experience. But it really kind of depends on people's reasons. And sometimes it is for the reasons that Karen described. And other times it is one person in their relationship, or both people in the relationship are bisexual. And so they want partners of both sexes.
Oh, that's fine. That's completely different.
But are not interested in swinging. Or a continual stream of, one steady partner and a continual stream of side partners. That I consider that to be fairly dysfunctional, having a continual string of side partners. And it's the reason I say that is because you do form an emotional connection when you have sex. I would consider it inevitable. But it's still considered polyamory if you have a trio that are lifelong partners, or you have 4 people that make themselves lifelong partners with each other. That's still polyamory. It doesn't necessarily mean having partner after partner after partner. You don't necessarily have to have a situation where you're sleeping around, and there's 2 different very distinct sets of people there. The people that, this is one of the reasons why I say don't step into this lightly. There's the people that go into it with the idea that and that's an open relationship. Okay, so there's people that go into polyamory with the idea of using it as an open relationship. And then there's people that go into it with the idea of dedicating themselves, being in a dedicated relationship with more than one person that is dedicated within the entire relationship between all of the people in the relationship. Both are very difficult to make work. I cannot see the open relationship where you just screw around as being a very successful thing. That would probably be the hardest thing to maintain, where especially in a straight relationship, because you have the other issue of women have a lot more opportunity. They just do. That's just the way it is. Women are going to find 10 potential sex partners for every sex partner, their male partner, their husband, their boyfriend, whatever. Every potential partner he comes across, he finds, that is bad wording, he's gonna have 10 competitors, and that's if both of them are conventionally decent looking or better. If one of them is conventionally better looking than the other, if she is conventionally better looking than him, then it's going to be worse. And
Yeah,
oddly enough, if he is conventionally better looking than her, women will assume he's lying when he says he's in an open relationship, and they will assume he's just trying to cheat. And it'll still be worse for him. So
yeah,
this is one of those situations where you end up with the guy literally getting the short end of the stick. And he's going to end up being dissatisfied with the open relationship in the long run, and especially if the woman has no consideration for his experience of having less opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And her sleeping around.
Well, and she's some of the people that I've talked to who have been involved in this sort of the open relationship, and they did describe themselves as polyamorous, and they were looking for long-term stuff, but she would actually lord it over him, she was just so much more, she was better at polyamory than him, and she was just so much more successful than him at all of his, and she had and it's like I'm thinking, you're literally rubbing your muff in his face, right? Or his face in your muff, and going, yeah, I'm just superior to you. No, you're not. You're just female.
Well, and
right?
the thing is, just by saying that, she's not better at it than he is. By saying that, she's doing the opposite of being good at it, because you're still in a partnership. When you get together with someone for life, when you make someone your partner, whether you marry them, whether you move in with them and decide to live together for the rest of your lives, you're dedicating yourself to that person. Your primary thing should be a dedication to that person's welfare. You care about that person.
Know.
You want that person to be happy. You celebrate their successes, and you're
it's not
sad
a
when they're not
competition.
successful. And when they hurt, that hurts you. That's what being in love is with somebody is all about. I mean, you're not in love with somebody if you, in that type of a situation where you're dealing with something that would kill his ego. In that kind of a situation, you're rubbing something in his face like that. That's not love. That's being a bitch. That's a red flag. That's telling him, you know what? I'm not good enough for you. You really should leave and find some other woman who's actually better at being a partner. And Jesus, why would you treat someone like that anyway? But
well, and I have to actually also say that it may well be that evolutionarily, because there are no polyandrous societies. There are societies where women have walking marriages or visiting marriages out there, which is essentially serial monogamy, right? Okay, but there are no societies that have, for any length of time, been predicated on the idea that a woman might have 2 or 3 or 4 husbands all at the same time, who she is married to in the traditional sense of being married, right? That just doesn't exist, right? And yet there are societies, even though almost all human societies operate on monogamy, and most of the, even in the societies that allow polygyny, even in those societies, most of the pairings are monogamous. There is still some kind of evolutionary basis behind the idea of a husband juggling multiple wives, right? And having one or having 2 or 3 or 4 wives all at the same time, and being able to devote himself to that. So in terms of how we have been prepared in our evolutionary history, we came from a polygynous species, and there has been polygyny that has transformed since we came from that ancestor species where all of the mothers were single mothers, and there was no paternal investment in offspring, and there was no food sharing with females, and all of that stuff. We have we transported ourselves across a place where both monogamous marriage and polygynous marriage required a male investment in the female and the children. And we have a evolutionary footprint that actually says that there is such a thing as a man who can be married to more than one woman and love her and invest in her and invest in their kids and do all of those things. There is no precedent. There is no social precedent. There is no cultural precedent. There is no evolutionary precedent for the reverse. None. None.
And that explains why the one polyamorous relationship that I know of that was successful for the long term was a man and two women. Straight man, bisexual woman.
Yeah,
or bisexual women.
Makes sense.
And it wasn't something that I couldn't tell you how it is now, but like, because I don't know, but at the very least at the time it was pretty obvious that it was very dedicated. It was everything that traditional marriage that I saw in traditional marriages, like actual traditional marriages, not neo-tradcon traditional. Everything that I saw was in that. It's just that it went three ways, and it was very much like an equilateral triangle. It wasn't something where one person was the side chick. It was everything. The responsibility in the relationship, the dedication in the relationship, everything went all directions. And that was like you couldn't break that relationship down from the outside.
I think honestly, that like heaven forfend, right? My guy meets some extremely attractive, maybe Latina woman who is really, really good at staying organized, and maybe she cooks and cleans and all of that, and heaven forfend, I would tell him, okay, well, she can sleep in between us in the bed, and that would be great. Does she do windows? Because the dog put nose prints all over our front window here. But I mean, like, I am not the jealous type. I am not the jealous type at all. So like, I am perfectly fine with the whole idea of, in terms of men, sexual infidelity. It does not bother me. It just doesn't bother me. If I know you're emotionally here in this room, then it just doesn't bother me. I really do fall into that kind of, that female thing of seeing emotional cheating as more of a betrayal than physical cheating. But at the same time, right, don't take anything out of, if you were going to do that, you better not be taking anything out of this relationship. It had better be something that contributes to this relationship in some way, right? And for me, at least now at this point in time, it would be like, oh yeah, no, if we could have like a live-in nanny, housekeeper, and personal chef who also likes to have threesomes with us, that would be great, right? Like, yeah. I'd be like fine with that, but like I know how at the same time, like, where are you going to find that? It's just not. It's not going to happen, right? Like, so this is the fantasy, but it's something that if it actually came into being in the real world, I could actually deal with it. But as far, like, I don't want to. Even as easy as it is to have sex with men, right? Like, I forget how I put it exactly to somebody, but I could go into any bar and whisper 5 seconds of dirt into any man's ear, right? And like 10% of the men in that bar would totally, at the minimum, 10% of the men in that bar would go with me. Yes, they would. Yes, they would. You know it.
I think you're underestimating.
I didn't even whisper any dirt in your ear, and you were like all over me. So even with that, it's like, oh my God, like, what are they going to actually bring that, into the relationship? It's just going to be.
This is why I say it's really not for everybody. This is something that
it really isn't for everybody.
And a lot of people like see it as a way to be, like I said, sleep around without being considered to be cheating. And so you get people that judge it based on that view, and you get people that go into it based on that view, and they're both wrong. And so the people that go into it based on that view, they end up, losing their relationships that they're in. And the people that judge it based on that view, well, fuck them. Just not literally, because they're already, they've already got bad ideas. But in any case, I'm going to move on to the next
Super chat.
Yeah. And say, let's see here. We have Uzi Patrol, who gave us US $20 and said, "Free the Badger. Good luck in court." Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And then we
don't need luck. We don't need luck.
That's true.
We got this shit, motherfucker.
That's true. We don't need luck, but it's always nice to have it anyway.
Oh my fucking God. Prim and I were in the courtroom. We were watching Allison lay down that fucking evidence, that fucking, like...
Yeah,
like,
we don't have luck, we don't need luck, we have evidence.
Yeah.
Well, not just evidence. We have evidence put together in the most perfect way possible. Like, every single thing led to the next thing, and it was just like, it was structured in the most beautiful way. And it was just like mind-blowingly perfect. Oh my God.
I would say it's like a Bob Ross painting, but there are no happy little accidents in Allison's evidence binder.
No, none. None. No happy little accidents. She planned all of her accidents, and none of them are happy. They're all just there, telling the truth, or at least not lying. So.
Yep. No, definitely telling the truth. And that said, though, like I said, thanks for the well wishes and for the $20. Both are helpful. Ziranx gave us $5 and says, "Don't know if this has been asked before. Is feminism the ultimate shit test, given they always ask men for stuff and don't do?" And I'm thinking he meant don't do anything. Is there one that can top it? And feminism is the ultimate in a lot of bad things. And I guess, yeah, it is a shit test, because they're constantly pushing men a little farther and a little farther. Give us rights that men had to fight for, but we don't want to have to do anything to earn those rights. Give us all the same rights that men have in terms of legal privileges and financial autonomy, but we don't want to have to be as responsible for ourselves financially as men, so make our husbands still pay us if we leave the marriage. And just continually on and on. We're going to say how much we hate men, but we want men to protect us from men. And so we're going to demand that men pass laws to punish men for doing things to us. That these laws already exist, but we're going to say they don't. And we're just going to continually poke at the legislative machine
or if we
continually tweak those laws. Oh, and by the way, let's take away this little bit of due process. Let's take away this little bit of due process.
Just a little bit.
I mean, they don't
need it.
Another chunk.
They have so much privilege elsewhere.
And if we're gonna admit that the laws exist, we're gonna essentially say, well, it was the men in power who did that. It wasn't us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just men attacking each other. It's all your fault.
Oh, and now pay for our shit too. Pay for our birth control. Pay for our recreational drugs.
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, it's a shit test. It's definitely a shit test. Where's the line? Where are you gonna stop? When are you gonna stop?
The whole exercise of feminism is a giant, and I said this like ages and ages ago, is a giant society-wide shit test that men continuously fail.
And honestly,
they continuously, constantly, over and over again, every fucking day, from like 150 years ago into perpetuity, they fail. You fail.
I mean, look at it this way, okay? And as far as the last question, is there one that can top it? How about this? What does it have to top in order to top it? Because we have a society now, we live in a society now where the law says that if you get married to a woman and you stay married to her for 10 years and then she cheats on you and abuses you and then divorces you, that you owe her alimony and child support. She gets custody of your kids. She gets to decide whether you see them or not because the law doesn't enforce your side of the custody agreement. You will be deemed a deadbeat if you don't do everything that she wants, and you will be deemed the abuser if you try to hold her accountable for any of her actions.
Oh, that's
where we are now, and men have allowed that through voting in this legislation, through courtroom rulings and everything. That's been allowed, right? And they've asked for more shit beyond that, and it's being considered. What shit test could anyone come up with that would present something worse than she could take your children away and charge you money for it?
How about
she can destroy your reputation. She can lie about you in court. She can lie about you in public.
How about if my boyfriend leaves the cap off the toothpaste yet a fucking again, and I decide to glass him over that, and then I'm like, yeah, no, I told him like 3 times. To put the cap on the
people will point at you and say, "You go, girl."
And so he totally deserved that shit. You know, like it really is like a guy that I dated after I divorced, before I met the guy I'm with now. He said, like, what the fuck is going on here? Why am I still paying for this bitch? Like, is she coming over to my house 3 times a week, cooking, cleaning, and sucking my dick? Why do I have to pay for her to exist?
Yeah. So what could you possibly come up with for a shit test that would top after taking down due process, after taking down parental rights, after putting men in a situation essentially where they can be enslaved by the state on behalf of their ex-wife? And then afterwards asking for more shit. What could you come up with that would be a bigger shit test?
But Hannah,
what shit test could you come up with that would ask for more?
But Hannah, if abortions aren't free and as convenient as a haircut, then they're not really a choice.
We've already got,
there we go,
like shit test. We've already got bucket that we fill with the elephant shit at the zoo, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, like
where
can you go?
Than this.
Where can you go from here? What other like free tampons from the government? Jesus. Yeah, that's actually been requested.
Okay, you know what's
in the letterbox.
Been done. It's too late. That's been done. They've already brought that up. And there are already men arguing on behalf of it. I will tell you right now, if the government sends free tampons to my house, I am sending them back and asking for fucking toilet paper. Everybody at my house uses that.
I want you to know, okay? I want you all to know, everybody who's listening, there is a beautiful, beautiful video by Noel Plum 99 called The Dishonesty and Duplicity of Christy Winters or something like that, right? Where he goes into the tampon tax, okay? Because the tampon tax in the UK is apparently this major feminist issue, because it is tampons are taxed as a luxury item, and they're subjected to a 5% value-added tax, VAT, value-added tax. That value-added tax is just anything that's been processed or manufactured. If you buy like raw logs, you don't get charged VAT, but if you buy a piece of furniture built from logs, then you get charged value-added tax, right? Okay, so tampons in the UK. Tampons in the UK subjected to a 5% luxury value-added tax. OMG, what a hideous thing. And of course, things that men need that are just as necessary, like razors to shave their faces, are not charged this luxury tax, and therefore everything is horrible and misogynistic. Okay, but the tax on razors, whether for men or women, the value-added tax is 20%. Also, the value-added tax on toilet paper is 20%. And it was just maybe less than a decade ago that feminists were clamoring about the 20% value-added tax on tampons, and the UK government said, I don't know how we can get away with this, given the European Union regulations on value-added tax. The only way we can actually lower the tax on tampons is by classifying them as a luxury item. So, we'll classify these tampons as a luxury item at 5% compared to 20% for fucking toilet paper and diapers and baby wipes and fucking toothpaste and razors and hairbrushes and combs and shampoo and all of these other things we see as necessities. We'll call them a luxury item so that they will only be taxed at a rate of 5% compared to 20% for everything else.
Now, wait a minute.
Women should get everything free.
And
100%
then,
of the
then
time.
the feminists, 10 years later, the feminists come back and say, how dare you classify our tampons as a luxury and charge us tax on them?
Yeah, the real crime in this is that luxury items are taxed at a lower rate than necessities.
Oh,
That's
geez.
actually that's not necessarily.
That was
There's
just-
there's an argument to be made as to why that could be a thing and could make sense. But
yeah, but it just that
but
just blows
it
my
just-
mind.
okay, but there's an argument to be made as to how that could possibly make some kind of fiscal or economic sense.
Yes, but this is
Certainly,
not a fiscal or
but-
economic show, so
okay,
we're gonna move on.
But literally, they got what they wanted.
Yeah, we're gonna
They
be
got what they wanted. Another
2-hour show
complaining.
tonight. Yeah, and we have chat commenters here. Got
Toilet paper,
Mishka
20%.
Mo Squats. Why do you have to have such a hard to pronounce name, dude? Says Karen is yelling. Smash that like button. Which
It's very impressive.
So, yes. So on to the next one. Chris Stewart gave us
Go watch the Noel Plum video.
yes. Well, Chris Stewart gave us $10 and said, "Hey guys, me again, once more here to relate the current topic to my personal observations of the kink community, myself being a kinkster. In particular, the way norms demonize gay males." And then he continued it with another $10 super chat. And how lesbians are ignored or tolerated by, again, normies. A trend I've noticed in right-leaning kinksters is an almost total reversal of that attitude. He continues this with a third $10 super chat, so he gave us a total of $30 to say this to everybody. A lot of right-leaning kinksters tolerate male homosexuals because they are no longer competing for the same resources and think lesbians are lying to themselves. That's interesting. I have not ever been a part of the kink community, so I don't really know much about left and right-leaning kinksters, but that is interesting.
I don't know about left and right-leaning kinksters, but I will say that, you know, given that there was such a thing as political lesbianism, maybe there are some women who are lying to themselves about their lesbianism.
Well, I know one thing. I know that it's there's a great deal more acceptance overall for women having a same-sex interest, but I think a lot of it is women presumed to be bisexual, and it's like,
I kissed a girl and I liked it. Yeah,
that's,
my boyfriend didn't mind it. Yeah,
and then like the I guess you could call them lipstick lesbians. I don't know if I'm using the term right, but get more tolerance than, say, the butch, bullish, and everybody looks at them and assumes that they are going to be automatically far left-wing, man-hating, thuggish, predatory assholes. And actually, from my experience, I mean, there are those that exist. It's not like they're absent from that end of the spectrum, but that behavior exists whether in lesbians, bisexual women, straight women, and there are bullish, very butch straight women who act like that and are very domineering, ball-busting assholes. You know, so this is not necessarily a sexuality-related thing.
All right, Hannah. If you have something to say about me, then just fucking come out and say it.
You're not a ballbuster, but no. In any case, I've also known women who would be classified as bull dykes who were very much like high testosterone men, in that they were protective of the people close to them, and very compassionate and kind-hearted, and very gentle people. And the only time that it came out, you know, that they could be the angry, violent, asshole-ish type is if you threatened someone they loved. And it was like, you know, a man trapped in a woman's body almost.
Or a pit bull trapped in a woman's body.
Well, because pit bulls kind of get a bad rap too. And most of the time they are very gentle, loving creatures. In fact, they were initially, before they were bred for pit fighting, they were used as nanny dogs. But yeah, so this is something that, like, I don't know, maybe the right-leaning kinksters are a little bit different than the rest of society, because they are in a more closed environment, in a more echo chambery environment, because, you know, they're not necessarily, I know this is something that you don't generally share with the mainstream that you're doing. If you have a particular kink and you associate with others around that kink, it's going to be a closed community. So maybe the difference is that they end up in an echo chamber where they have this impression, and it gets batted around and bounced around and kept that way, because it's at odds with what I see of the rest of society. But in any case, let's see, going to Karan Strong gave us €5 and said, you need to cloak your women in the West, Karen. Don't you know the hijab is the new black? Works great on body positivity too, by the way.
So like when I put on my when I finally decide that, you know, I've secured this man, I have locked him in.
You haven't secured nothing.
Yeah. Okay. And
is he admitting to being insecure?
no, he says I haven't. He says I haven't secured anything. But
Obviously
then I can be off with the makeup on with the pounds, and I can just hide the whole thing under a burqa. Excellent.
There you
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And Chris Stewart gave us $5 and says, the way feminists in particular and society at large ignore the high rates of domestic abuse among lesbians is disgusting. This is something that happens with respect to abuse in general. Women get away with it. Women get away with it because women's violence isn't viewed as violence. You know, we did a few shows on this. It goes back to that thing. Somebody says something reprehensible to another person, and the second person hauls off and slaps the first person across the face. You describe that scenario, most people will put the person who said something reprehensible, they'll see that must be a man, and the person who slapped must be a woman, because then they'll feel okay with the slap. Well, why should they? That person has just escalated the abuse from verbal abuse to physical abuse. And if it was a woman who said the reprehensible thing and a man who slapped, everybody would know that. Everybody would see that. They might not even see the reprehensible thing as abuse. Especially if it was a disparaging remark about his dick size or something like that. They wouldn't necessarily recognize that it was abuse. That needs to change. And it needs to change not just for lesbians, but straight couples. And this is something that you look at the dynamics of domestic violence. The group that has the least amount of domestic violence is gay men. And it is because they know if they hit, their partner can hit back. And so if they hit, they are starting a fight, a physical fight. And they aren't going to be defended by anybody who's going to say, well, he shouldn't have hit you, even if you hit him first. That's not going to happen like it does for women. They're not going to be considered the victim if they start the fight. And so they don't. You know, and that it's a situation where there has to be an imbalance and an asshole at the same time before you get an abuse situation in a relationship between gay men. Whereas with lesbians and with straight women, all you have to have is one asshole woman who uses violence as her means of dealing with conflict, as her first means of dealing with conflict, and you have abuse. And it doesn't get stopped because there isn't somebody that's going to come along and say, well, you hit first, you're not a victim. It's just gonna be treated like she didn't do anything wrong, and she's used to it. That's what's got to change. It is disgusting, but it's not limited to lesbians. Then we have Field of Bears gave us $5 and says, just came in from Crowder. Has anybody reminded everyone that socialism always ends in starvation and genocide yet? Well, yes, Field of Bears, you did. Let's see. And now I've
there we go. Congratulations.
I've gotten to the end of the ones I had copied over onto my text file to make them easier to read. So that's... Okay, starting now. Okay, so Jet Morrison gave us $2 Canadian and apparently didn't say anything. Thank you for that, Jet Morrison.
Thank you.
Mark, the Atheist, gave us $2 and says, Karen, why Latino women? The cleaning? And then gave us a winky face with tongue sticking out and says, haha.
Yeah, and then I said, I like petite brown women who know their way around Lemon Pledge. Women don't have to be brown. They just need to be petite.
There you go.
and be clean. Like, well, not clean, but like actually clean.
Cleaning.
Because I don't do that. Yeah, no, that would... If you know anybody, just send them my way.
You get like 1,000 messages now.
Because like I Like I would be totally down with that. Somebody like wash walls, windows, bathtubs, you know, cook, wash dishes, do laundry, you know.
Everybody wants somebody that does all those things.
All that stuff. That would be
your shower.
That would be great. That would be great. And also, you know, like be petite.
You know, here in the
hey, I got that too.
You know, kind of like a little round bottom and well, okay. I'm gonna say
there's a maid service you can hire that does all that stuff naked.
Ooh.
Oh.
Now that I have everyone's attention, Chris Stewart gave us $5 US and says, "You are definitely right about the echo chamber isolated nature of the internet kink community, Hannah." I kind of thought so. This is one of the reasons why I've said, you know, don't censor even bad ideas. Not that the kink community itself is a bad idea or anything, but it's related in that when you censor bad ideas, people create sort of secret forums and go to quiet places where everybody else isn't there to contradict them, and they talk about it anyway, and they create their little echo chamber, and then you get, you know, pedophiles coming out of their little pedo platforms where that's all they talk about, and they have ridiculously stupid arguments that they get into on Twitter, and they say things that sounded really clever to each other in those forums, and they argue them as if they are really clever, and they argue the same stupid shit over and over again to try to convince people that individuals who cannot figure out that there is no little magical fairy that takes your tooth out from underneath your pillow and leaves money are old enough to consent to sex. And yeah, so echo chambers, like, so when something is discussed in an area where everybody doesn't talk about it, where it doesn't have the general public weighing in on it, where there's not outside contradictions to things that people say, you're going to get an echo chamber. And I would imagine that the secretive, or at least private nature, because it's not necessarily secretive all the time, but the private nature of the kink community would lead to a similar echo chamber. And so they would end up with at least some misconceptions about people based on that. That's not to say that there are not political lesbians who are lying to themselves, but if they view all lesbians that way, then it's a misconception. Because there are women who really want nothing to do with dick. And yeah, like, they couldn't be less interested. There's just, it's not possible for them to be less interested than they already are. And,
yep.
And that's okay. You know, just like it's perfectly okay that there are men who couldn't be less interested than they already are in vagina. Who cares? People have their interests. But yeah, it's that type of misconception that they're lying to themselves. That's probably a result of an echo chamber. Meximan and Cheese gave us $5 and says, "Just 'cause."
Thanks, man.
That's cool. Thank you. I haven't seen Cuz in years. Actually, I had a friend that everybody called him Cuz, and he was everybody's buddy. He's a sweetheart. Steel Trap gave us $5 and said, "If women wore red burqa, they'd get lots of people trying to stick letters in their slots." Ironic.
Not in Canada. not in Canada, because our mailboxes are now pink.
Ours are blue. So it would have to be a blue burqa, which would lead to really bad jokes.
A pink burqa in Canada.
Yeah, that would look like people drowning bubble gum.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I literally noticed it was like, because you know, like you go through your life and you never actually have to ever use a mailbox in your life, because nobody ever sends anything in the mail anymore, right? And so I'd been about 5 years without ever sending anything in the mail other than like maybe going and sending a parcel through the post office, right? But so I didn't even realize that there were still mailboxes in existence. I was just like, oh, you go to the post office for that, right? But no, there are mailboxes and they're pink.
Okay. Well,
Pink.
Are they female boxes since they're pink now?
I get like and they have like weird. They're not like a solid color. They're like pink with. They look like they have like almost like passport stamps all over them or something, right? Like it's a very. Somebody can call up an image of a Canadian mailbox now. But that's what they look like now, and
yeah,
and
I can imagine though, like a sea of women in pink burqas would just look like walking dildos,
walking vaginas.
Yeah,
maybe
like
maybe
that's just
maybe they could put those like two little peaks on the side of the top of their burqas.
Well, besides, isn't part of the point of the article of clothing to make you non-distinctive?
Yes.
So they're probably all going to be. It's the same thing as the clothes that the Puritans and the Quakers, all the different groups that you had to be plain Jane to be part of the group. You didn't have anything fancy on your clothing. They all wore, dark blue or black. You don't see a lot of bright colors on Mennonites either. You might have little flower prints.
Even the Amish didn't have. They didn't use buttons.
Right. There is that's so there wouldn't be any color on those anyway. But going on.
Buttons were too vain.
Yep, too vain. Well, maybe that was actually added to their repertoire of laws by somebody with arthritis, though. No, let's just say they're too vain, and then we won't have to do buttons. Field of Bears gave us $5 and said, Honey Badger Radio endorses at Field of Bears. That's FIELDOBEARS on the Twatter. Yes, on the Twatter, which I haven't been on in a week because I've been mostly away from the computer. Chris Stewart gave us $10 and said, being part of said echo chamber has resulted in the idea of female guilt, reverse male guilt, an alien concept to most, not being so to me because I've actually had to deal with it before. And then another $10 and said, seriously, how do women deal with male guilt from soy boy types? I get really creeped out when kinkster women do it with me, yet many women seem to exult in the male tears.
I tell them to stop it.
Yeah.
It's weird. It drives me bonkers.
Yeah, that depends on the woman. Women who don't hate men don't deal with that in the same way that, like, you get feminist women demand it. Feminist women are like, they'll revel in it.
That's gross.
You kiss their ring. They're the queen and all that shit. But no, it's discombobulating. I personally, I grew up with guys in a neighborhood full of mostly, at my age group, guys who were largely unsupervised in their play, and sandlot football was the order of the day. And I mean, the boys in my neighborhood, my brother got one pair of boxing gloves for Christmas, and they had a game where they made a boxing ring out of twine, and they would clasp hands, like their left hands together, and they'd have boxing gloves on their right hands, and they'd wail on each other until somebody gave or fell down or got knocked out of the ring. And like, these were guys that were, John Wayne was their hero, and you turn around and you run into the soy boy type that apologizes for being a man. It's like, what planet did I just land on, and how do I get out of here?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't say that it creeps me out in the way that, like, you know, somebody drooling over your neck because they're going to eat you would creep you out or something like that. But in terms of what's wrong with you, this is uncanny valley shit. You know, the same reason I don't have a bunch of dolls on my dressing table. That actually, yeah, it's in that way it's creepy. And in the way of, you know, seeing somebody walk along the edge of a cliff and not have great balance is creepy. It's that kind of creepy. But yes, and I will at times, if I really feel like I got to deal with it, I'll tell them to fuck off with it, or no, you don't have to do that, or, you know, what makes you think that that's wise, but not. Yeah, you know, most of the time it's just, I'm out of there.
Stop! Like, it's not good for you to be thinking that way.
Yeah. And yeah, is this the? I grew up in the 70s. Yes, I'm old. Okay. Dale Power. John Wayne was their hero. This was in the 60s, the 70s. This was in the 70s and the 80s. John Wayne, Bruce Lee. You know, the back when the WWE was the WWF. Yeah, that was the way it was. But anyway, last one here, we have Steel Trap gave us another $5. Thank you again. And pics of Canadian mailbox in before Justin Trudeau images. Okay.
It's pink.
Oh boy.
And it's covered with stuff.
Yeah, I'm not even showing video on this, so that would take some time. All you got to do is look it up. Do a Google search for Canadian mailbox. You'll find it.
Canadian mailbox. Do it.
Do it. And with that, I am going to once again mention Badger Feed. This is something that like, we've shilled this up one side and down the other. If you're not already there, you should be. This is, like I said, our only way of being able to counter the situation of being in Google's gulag and of being in YouTube's bad kid corner. You know, this is how we get around if Twitter decides that they're gonna ban our accounts just for being us. And like I said earlier, Google doesn't show results from the Honey Badger Brigade blog. Google, and it may not be a universal thing with the blog. There may be some results that slip through their filter, but there have been numerous times where I've lost my bookmark and tried to reference something that one of our writers wrote, and tried to look it up on Google and couldn't find it on Google. And back when we didn't have as good of a search function on our blog, tried to look it up using quotes, and hey, it still didn't come up. Google said no results. So clearly we do get censored. If you want to find us even when we're being censored, go to badgerfeed.com.
Chris Stewart, you bastard. And your inconvenient super chat.
Yes, and Chris Stewart gave us $2 and says, an inconvenient super chat in all caps.
Yes, and I will absolutely 100% claim my privilege as being somebody who's going through some shit right now. So
yeah,
we're gonna end because
Karen said so.
Yeah, so, because I have some shit going on, and
yes,
it's not
so
great. Yeah.
So to end the shill, just go to badgerfeed.com, man. It's where all the cool kids are.
But it was a good try, Chris Stewart.
And to all the cool kids listening tonight, including Chris, to my co-hosts, and to everyone who makes Honey Badger live streams happen, and especially those who have to go through this 2.5-hour show and find the good parts for you guys later on. Thank you.
Yeah, that's gonna suck.
And good night.
Good night.